Good evening, everyone. This is Ram Mohan. Today we are talking to Jeremiah about how we can use Lean Startup methodology for creating a brand. So I would like Jeremiah to start up with his introduction and get started with the questionnaire we have sent him before. Yeah, up to you, Jeremiah.
Thanks so much, Ram, for having me, and I'm glad to be with you guys on this live hangout. And yeah, so my name's Jeremiah Gardner. I'm the author of The Lean Brand, and I get to work with entrepreneurs and startups really all over the world to help them develop kind of a passionate audience for their startup and for the problem that they're solving. So I'm excited to be with you guys, and really excited to be here. And I kind of want to just jump right into what I hope you get out of this is that no one's really figured out exactly who's a master or who's an expert or a guru in startups. There's a million different ways that you can approach a startup. And so what I always say before I give a talk is that if there's something in here that stands out to you that is valuable to you, take it, steal it, remix it, use it, do whatever you can with it. You have my permission to use anything that makes sense to you or that adds value to your startup. Anything that doesn't, that's okay. Find another thing that works. Find something that does make sense to you so that you can start to develop an audience in a way that's sustainable and that creates passion for the people around you. So, Ram, do you want me to just go ahead and jump right into the talk here?
Yes, Jeremiah.
Okay, good. So cool. So what's the Lean brand? Well, Lean brand, I'm going to kind of share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes, you can see it.
Great. So if you'd like to join along, the hashtag is hashtag Lean brand. I'm at Jeremiah Gardner and my co-author Brent Cooper. So the first question really when it comes to branding in a different way is what is a brand? And when you think about those 5 little words or 5 little letters, a lot of meaning gets packed into the word brand. Here in the U.S., in English, we can't even really decide on what part of speech it is. So we use the word brand when we say something like a brand. And what we mean is that it's a noun. It's something that exists as a noun. We might turn around in the same sentence and use it as a verb when we say we need to brand ourselves or we need to brand. Then it's a verb. And we turn around and use it as a possessive noun. We say it's my brand versus your brand. And then we even use it as a synonym for business when we say things like, the top 5 brands in consumer safety or top 5 tech brands of 2015. And we can't even really decide on it. And I'm sure if I asked kind of the room what is a brand, there'd be many different definitions that get floated out. Everything from a brand is what people say it is, a brand is your logo, a brand is how people feel about you, a brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. There's all sorts of definitions floating around about brand. And so in order to practice innovation with brand, the first thing we need to do is understand what it is. So to me, the way that I think about it, when we think about all these different kind of definitions and things that are out there, the most important thing is the human element of what it means. And that to me is that a brand is, capital I-S, a relationship. And it's a relationship that develops between an organization and an audience. And it's a relationship because it's the way that we interact and relate to the world around us. And so if you think about, there's companies probably that you have a great relationship with. There's probably companies that you have kind of a terrible or abusive relationship with. And if I were to ask you to name a company that you love, that you are absolutely 100% in on, you may name Apple or you may name your cell phone provider, although I doubt it. You may name a clothing company or a new app or maybe Uber. It's the way that you are in. You are passionate about the relationship you are in with that company.
Jeremy, I'm sorry, we can't see your screen. It went blank.
You can't see. Uh-oh.
No, it's visible actually.
Can you see it now?
Now we can see. I think if you.
Better?
I think we can see it now.
You can. Okay.
We can see, but it's not. It's not. It's still. It's still not in preview mode. It's still. We can see the in edit mode.
Okay. Well, why don't I just turn off screen sharing and I can share this some other way. Is that okay?
We can see you now.
You can see me now?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so as I was saying, what is a brand? And I said if there were, there's probably companies that you have a great relationship with. In the inverse, if I ask you, what are some companies that you don't like or that maybe you're in a bad relationship with, you probably have a list of those that you're upset with. And airlines usually come out, telecom providers usually come out. And it's because the way that we relate to the company, the way that we relate to value, comes down to the way that we form a relationship with them. And so for a startup, it's foundational to look at brand, whether you're being intentional about it or you're not, that relationship is forming. It's forming with your audience, it's forming with your service providers, it's forming with your employees. It's happening whether you're intentional about it or you're not, which is good news for a startup. And so what we kind of argue is that we need to become intentional about the way that we build that relationship. Kind of in the old way that we would look at branding, conventional branding was always kind of this idea of what we call the myth of the brand genius. And that is that, a startup founder wins a pitch contest, and we ask him, what are you going to do with your, $5,000? What are you going to do with your $10,000? And they say, branding, of course. We've got to get our logo and our color scheme and our letterhead together. And for us, that's the myth of the brand genius, that you could simply take your solution or your product or your company to somebody up on a 50th floor boardroom on Madison Avenue and pay them a lot of money to give you what your relationship ought to be. The conventional model is really one direction. It says that we can control the message, we can control the look and the feel and the language and the brand architecture around whatever you're going to present. Typically, it's downstream through a logo or a color palette or a promise or a certain set of words or a mood board to try and tell us what exactly we are. And most of the time, that's managed by a brand genius, somebody that's in an agency, somebody that is not part of your team, but that is outsourced to give you or that you're paying to get that relationship. And to us, today, branding is no longer about a tight message or how far you can broadcast or how loud you can broadcast. Today, to build a sustainable relationship that's built around passion with your audience, branding has to be about delivering value. And that's value to your customer. It's value to the people that will eventually join you and join what you want to accomplish with your startup. And so that's why we kind of say brand meet lean. So how do you do this? In a lean brand, we really want to practice innovation. Innovation meaning we want to search. We don't know what the relationship would look like. We're not quite sure. We can't predict what that relationship will look like, and therefore we can't execute upon what's unknown. So therefore we have to search. We have to practice innovation. We have to practice significant change in building that relationship. And the only way that we can practice innovation is through experimentation. And so it's what can you build today, right now, to start experimenting with the relationship you're building with your audience. And all of this is really managed by how much you can learn or how little you learn, which is what we call validated learning. How much do you actually learn through your experimentation about the relationship that you're forming? And this makes a ton of sense because, I always talk about the idea that a startup uniquely just doesn't know. A startup truly is a company, as Dave McClure likes to point out, is a company that's confused about, number one, what its product is, number two, who its customers are, and number three, how to make money. And all of that's okay. That's the nature of being in a startup. It's the nature of creating new value. And so to start building a relationship with your audience, we have to kind of start by looking at where we fall inside of the building. And so what we talk about is the innovation spectrum. Clayton Christensen in his work coined the terms sustaining innovation and disruptive innovation. Brant Cooper put them on a spectrum, and we call that the innovation spectrum. So if you imagine on the left side of the spectrum, we would say it's sustaining. Sustaining innovation is really innovations happening inside of an existing market. Typically, the problem is well understood by both the company and the audience or the customer. They understand that they have the problem. Typically, innovation improves differentiation. In other words, we're differentiating between our competitors, or we're differentiating between solutions through our innovation. It's typically incremental change, small changes over time. And on the sustaining side of the spectrum, that relationship or branding, the way that you build the relationship, truly leads the way when it comes to the way that you build a foundation of an audience. On the other side of the spectrum, on the disruptive side, typically it's an unknown or completely new market, right? Unknown market to you, or a new market that doesn't exist yet. The problem's not well understood, typically both by the company that's creating the solution and by the customer. They don't know they have the problem, or they may not understand the problem well enough. Typically, innovation is dramatic. We see huge shifts occurring on the disruptive side, and it's typically radical change that's occurring both for the customer and for the company. And on the disruptive side, in order to build that relationship, typically the product is going to lead the way. Product will typically prove out whether or not there's an audience or a market on the disruptive side. And so when I typically ask in the room on the sustaining side, what are some companies that come to mind? And I usually hear things like, the iPhone 6, right? iPhone 1, maybe it was more on the disruptive side, but iPhone 6 or the new phone with the edge on it that has a screen on the edge is sustaining. Or typically clothing companies, or typically restaurants, sustaining side. It's because it's an existing market, it's a cell phone market. The problem is well understood. Innovation is truly about differentiation. It's incremental change. And the reason that we go with an Apple phone versus an Android phone or versus a LG phone is typically because of the relationship we formed with that company. We have trust. We have some sort of baseline of understanding about what they're about. We are or we're not an Apple person or an Android person. That innovation is improving differentiation between the relationships we have. On the disruptive side, the companies come to mind typically are companies like Uber, which if you think about Uber as a premise, our whole lives, our parents tell us, as we're growing up, don't get into cars with strangers, right? That's what they're telling us constantly. And Uber says, I have an idea. We're going to create an app that all you need to do is tap a button, and when you tap that button, a stranger will show up in a car that you can get into and they'll give you a ride, right? Totally unknown market, problems not well understood from a customer's point of view. Innovation is dramatic. We hear things like you're the Uber of food service, or we're the Uber of the drones or something like that. It's dramatic, and we're seeing radical change with Uber, right? All over the states, both airports and ports and all kinds of tourist organizations are having to deal with the fact that customers want to use Uber, and what that means to the taxi unions, what that means for the taxi drivers, and having to constantly shift ground. The radical changes occurring on that disruptive side. And so when it comes to building your relationship with your audience, the first question is, where are you on that innovation spectrum? Obviously, at first, it's a guess. But if you're starting a new app that basically improves a little bit on something that already exists, it's a known market, the innovation is really about differentiation, it's incremental change. Truly, the relationship, that brand element, something that's outside of the product is really going to matter for your success. Whereas if you're on the disruptive side, truly you need to prove whether or not the customer has the problem and whether or not the product truly solves that problem in order to have a shot at the relationship. A great example of this is I was in Boston at MIT giving a talk, and a couple of entrepreneurs came up and were very concerned about their name. They said, we need your help. We need to figure out the right name for our startup and for our product. And I said, well, tell me about what you do. What's the product? What are you working on? And in true MIT, Boston fashion, she says to me, well, we built this robot. I said, cool. Tell me more about your robot. She said, well, the robot really helps and teaches kids how to read. Great. The robot sits down and teaches kids how to read. She says, yeah. So a child that's learning how to read, instead of sitting with their mom or their dad or their teacher, they simply buy the robot sits down and teaches the child how to read, and is reacting to the child or anything like that. And she says, what we really need to get right is our name. We just can't figure out what our name and our branding needs to be. And I said, name it Reading Robot. It doesn't matter what you name it, right? It's a completely unknown, brand new market. This is a disruptive idea, right? The problem in terms of a child reading from a robot is not well understood. Right? If you're successful in this, innovation will be dramatic. Is a robot now going to teach your children how to tie their shoe, how to speak a different language? What else is there? It's going to be radical change. So you need to prove first and foremost that the problem exists and that the product solves the problem in a way that it creates satisfaction in order to find success with your idea and with what you're building. The brand side of it, in terms of the traditional things like name and color scheme and logos, really doesn't matter. Pick a decent font, name it Reading Rainbow, and start to get out there and validate that the product solves the problem. So for you, where do you exist? Are you on the sustaining side? Are you on the disruptive side? And what does that mean for the audience that you're trying to build a relationship with? What are their expectations? What are they wanting out of that relationship? What do they desire out of forming a relationship with a company like yours? That's the first question. But all of this kind of exists inside of your building, right? So you're having this conversation with your founder or with your co-founders. You're having this conversation with your advisors or possibly your investors where you exist. The next step we have to do is get outside the building to understand the relationship from the view of the customer. And what we call that is the value stream. So in the value stream, you can kind of, again, I'll share all these slides once we're off the call. But in the value stream, basically you can imagine 7 different customer states that exist. And from start to finish, those states are the first ones aware. The customer is unaware of you and then becomes aware of you somehow, right? And all of this happens in some way that the customer will tell you through their behavior that they have become aware of you. So you can imagine that maybe there's a click on a link, or maybe there's some sort of email or something that happens that people become aware that you exist and that your product is trying to solve a problem. The second state, if they become aware of you, possibly they'll become intrigued. They're intrigued with the offer, they're intrigued with the problem that you're solving. They may have that problem or see that they have that problem. They're intrigued that you could solve it. They want it solved. You're making some sort of promise to them. The next state is trusting. The customer will trust that you can actually solve the problem, that you are the right one to solve it, and that the product that you're proposing actually will solve the problem that they're having. If they trust you, they may become convinced. If they're convinced, they're paying you some sort of currency. So in some ways, depending on your business model, that may be actually pulling, their wallet out and pulling their credit card out and paying you actual money. Some of them may, sign up for your free model. Some of them may take, the first step in within your conversion, but they're convinced enough to have some sort of value exchange, and this is typically money, to become your customer. Most entrepreneurs and startups stop there. They say we have to scale up on our awareness, we have to get them intrigued, trust us, and then we got to sell them. Once we sell them, then they get the product and stuff, we're done, right? But for us, it kind of goes a little bit farther. Once they're convinced, the next state is that they're hopeful. Then they're hopeful that the product can solve the problem, that you are the right one to solve it. I kind of think about it as being once you press order on Amazon, waiting for your package to show up. You're pretty hopeful that it's the right thing, that whatever you ordered is going to actually work, or maybe it comes with batteries or something like that. You're a hopeful state. And once they receive the product, the next state is really satisfied. They use it, they package it, they actually use it on the problem that they're having. If it works in the way that you told them it would work, they're probably satisfied. They're satisfied that you solved the problem. And then the last state is really where the relationship's happening throughout the value stream. But the last state, this kind of last box out in the far left here, is what we call the growth engine, and that's hopefully that customers will become passionate about you. And passion means that they're willing to share, that the net promoter score goes up, that Sean Ellis's must-have score goes up, or if you're using Dave McClure's pirate metrics, those metrics show you someone has become passionate about what you do, about the problem that you solve, and about who you are. And that passion turns into a growth engine. Now, organic growth always occurs from the passion of existing customers, rather than just sticking new people at the front of the acquisition box. So for us, the relationship happens throughout the value stream. You're building that relationship. But what we kind of teach is that the first place to focus is at the MVP stage, satisfied and hopeful. Can you actually solve the problem that you said you would solve? What does it look like to solve that problem? What is viability in solving it? The next place to focus is passionate. What about you? What about your product? What is it maybe outside the product? HubSpot's a great example. HubSpot is just a platform, right? That's all it is. But people are wildly passionate about it, right? Why? No one's passionate about a platform. Truly, we're not. But we're passionate about it. Well, it's helping us become better at our jobs. It's helping us become more successful. All that content is surrounding us in the ability to become better and more successful, hopefully, in the long term. So passion can exist because of the product. That happens sometimes. I'd say the iPhone is passion around the design and the beauty of the product itself. But typically passion exists for something outside of the product. Zappos is customer service. Netflix is new streaming and all their new content. Something outside of the product functionality that satisfies them by themselves. So all of this means, how do you figure out the relationship? From the innovation spectrum, where are we, to the value stream, how do we build a relationship based around passion and move our customers metrically through these 7 states? All of it is hypothesis-driven development. So what we want to do is say we don't know, because inherently we don't know as a startup. It's new. We're not sure what the relationship is. So therefore we have to guess. Think that. So it's hypothesis-driven development. And the way that shows up is that if we do X, if we were to build this, if we were to put a landing page out there, if we were to open up a pop-up shop, if we do something, what's the experiment? If we do some percentage of people, Y percentage of people will behave in way Z. That's the hypothesis-driven development that we want. That's the way that you build a sustainable and long-term audience, is to have an educated guess about what you think people will do, and then run experiments in order to discover what they actually do. I love to tell the story of my friend Chris Lindland up in San Francisco with his company, with his startup Beta Brand. If you haven't heard of Beta Brand is a clothing company. If you can imagine that innovation spectrum, where do clothes exist on the innovation spectrum? Typically, they're very, very far on the sustaining side, right? People know that they have the problem. Clothing, as far as solving the problem, is very well understood, known market. But Chris decided that he wanted to start a clothing company. And in the traditional way that you start a clothing company, you would create some designs, get them made. You'd find a model or someone to wear your stuff and hopefully gain entry into a fashion show. That model would wear your clothing, down the catwalk, and very, important and influential people would be there and decide whether or not, they wanted to scale up your design and carry your line of clothing. That's a traditional model of starting a clothing company. Chris decided that he wanted to take a different approach. He wasn't sure whether or not a relationship with people based around having fun with their clothing would actually be viable. So the first thing he did was he created a prototype, a very minimal product, which was a disco ball jacket. So you can imagine a disco ball, and it's in jacket form, right? So if you shine lights on it and twirl, you can light up an entire room. It's a pretty cool little jacket, right? And instead of mass producing these, trying to find a market for them, he simply put up a landing page and said, "Here's a disco ball jacket. I'll make these if 10 people buy them," right? And so he launches it. He gets some traffic to the site. People become aware of Beta Brand. They trust that maybe he'll actually make them, and 10 people buy them, 20 people buy them, a bunch of orders come in, he stops them, he says, "Okay, good, I can only make so many of these." He makes those jackets, he ships them, and he goes, "Great, I wonder if the product solves the problem." So the next thing he does is to say, "Hey, let's go farther in this relationship. Take a photo of you using, wearing your jacket and send it to me, and I'll use it on the homepage." All these photos, all these crazy situations start flowing in. And as Chris is launching new products, Chris is also getting people to play along with the new photos. And to this day, you can go to Beta Brand's website, and he calls all of these photos his model citizens. And people have been crazy about it. And so the more and more that Beta Brand pushed on the relationship, are people willing to play with their clothes? Are they willing to have fun? Are they willing to kind of have that sarcastic view of what they're wearing and go out and show it off? The more and more success they've had. And they've, time and time again, pushed on that button, and it's been successful. So what we say is that it's hypothesis driven. We think that people would want to play with their clothing, have fun with their clothing, and so therefore we could build what? We could build a disco ball jacket and launch it, and we think that 10% of people will buy it, and then 10% of people will then take a photo of it, share it with us, and in a crazy, ridiculous situation. So guess that for Beta Brand, all of this experimentation happens around what we call minimum viable brand, an MVB. So much like a minimum viable product, whenever you're running product experiments or learning through your product, you're probably leaving untapped brand learnings on the table about the relationship, about the audience, about their expectations. And so what we think is that you could also, within your MVP testing, be doing brand testing as well. So test your story. What is it about you? Why did you create this product? Why did you start the startup? You can be testing artifacts. Artifacts are simply markers that tell your story in a way that's relatable, that people can connect with. Everything from truly having an experience, taking your top 10 customers out to dinner, all the way down to creating some sort of landing page as an artifact of your story. And then finally, testing invitations. How are you inviting people to join you? What can they do in order to join you? And so we think that an MVP is really about your story, about those invitations, and about an artifact. And that you can test both with product and without, run parallel innovation to start learning about the relationship that people are forming with you. And all of this really happens not with everybody. You cannot create a relationship with the entire world, right? It's not going to happen. Most ask a first-time entrepreneur, who's your target market? The classic response is, well, I think everybody. And if you make them drill down a bit more, they may say, oh, well, I think it's, women who are, 30 to 60 who breathe air, right? And no, these are not the right answers. The right answer is it's not everybody. We never start delivering value to everybody. We start with one. Can we convince one person to come through all the way through the value stream, completely unaware of us, becoming passionate about us? Do we know why that happened? We have metrics in place to tell us that one person is in the satisfied state and is hopefully moving. There's a leading indicator that they're moving into passion, right? Can we tell that story? And if we can do it with one, can we replicate it? Can we turn one into two? And we've experienced 100% growth at that point, right? And then can we turn two into four? That's another 200% growth. All of our practice of building a relationship starts with one, focused in units of one, delivering value to one. That's where true innovation happens. Innovation really looks like attempting to something, a hypothesis, building something in order to experiment, learning from your audience, coming back and building again, right? It's the build, measure, and learn feedback loop. The same iterative loop that we use in product development, we can use in the way that we build relationships with our audience. And so that's really the Lean brand. I encourage you to go to leanbrandbook.com. You can download all of the artwork for free and use it if it's useful for you. There are case studies there, and you can download a free chapter right on the homepage. You kind of figure out your audience and start building that relationship with your audience. And yeah, that's the book. Thank you so much. Again, the hashtag is the Lean Brand, and I'm at Jeremiah Gardner on Twitter. Would love to connect.
Hi, Jeremiah. We have a few questions here. The first one is, when should startups start the branding activity?
So startups are already branded. So you don't start or stop branding, right? From the minute that you kind of tell your idea to someone that's not your grandmother or your roommate, and you say, I want to solve this, you are now practicing branding. You are building a relationship. And so for us, there isn't a real start or stop time. It's always happening. It's continuous. You're constantly in that relationship with an audience. You're constantly learning about it. And so you can either become intentional about those learnings and become purposeful about it, or you can kind of allow it to happen on your own. We've often seen examples of people that say, no, we're not going to offer customer service. That's fine. It's totally fine. You don't have to offer customer service. But realize that that's a brand decision. You've decided that you don't want to interact with your customers through customer service. Maybe you want to do it a different way. And so for us, the right time to focus is, if you haven't focused already on it, start now. It's start immediately by looking at what metrics tell us that our relationship is delivering value. How can we measure and run experiments around those different metrics and activities? And what could we do now to start learning about the relationship that we're building or that maybe already exists? If you're pretty far down the road, you have a couple hundred paying customers, you're launched, you're there. I always encourage entrepreneurs to go, tell me about your top 10 most passionate customers. Why do you think? What are the metrics that tell you that they're your most 10 passionate, right? And maybe it's the number of uses that they log in, or maybe it's how many times they've shared this article or that article, or maybe it's, like I said, their NPS score or their must-have score. Something's going to tell you, a combination of things will tell you who your most passionate customer is. And then you go back and look at, okay, if they're passionate, where did they tell us that they were satisfied? They were satisfied, what did they do when they were hopeful? What did they do when they were convinced? And move all the way back to awareness in order to understand the journey that they took to become a passionate customer of yours. So branding is both synchronous and asynchronous. It's happening now, and it's not happening now. That's the power of the internet, is that we can't turn off. And so our brand is always happening. It's about becoming intentional about the pieces that we believe are building a sustainable relationship, and leaving the pieces that don't work, stop doing those things, right? Does that answer your question, Ram?
Yes, yes, Jeremiah. Uh, so we have a relevant question over here. So somebody is asking if you are concentrating on branding while starting building the product, which should we concentrate more? Well, is it a product or is it building a brand?
Absolutely. So it depends. For the most part, products need to solve a problem, right? So if you're product centric, which most startups are, they have a product or they have a solution in mind. Um, you need to prove whether or not that product solves the problem that you set out to solve, right? So no amount of marketing or branding or any sort of PR can overcome a bad product. In fact, it's kind of a joke, but there's no quicker way to kill a bad product than with good marketing, right? So if you're product centric, then you have to be able to prove that that product solves that problem in some way. And so for us, you focus at the MVP stage. You focus on validating the problem, validating that the customer has it, and validating that your solution works. From there, you start to focus on passion. Now, as a little aside here, no matter what, when you're testing product validation or you're testing for the problem or you're running your customer interviews, there are brand learnings to be had, right? So whenever we run product, we want to or product experimentation, we want to build in opportunities for learnings about our relationship. Maybe it's just testing with that particular person. Who is this person that we're testing with? What's their story? How do they find us? Is this really a market that we think matters to our product or not? On the other hand, if you're segment-centric, meaning that I want to solve problems for whatever problems that that pilots have, for example, or that soccer athletes, professional soccer athletes have, then really you become product agnostic, right? You want to go and find out about the problems that they're having by learning from your customer segment. And that way, then you're being brand-led, right? You're being relationship-led. So you start to build the relationship with that audience to discover the problems they're having and hopefully meet them in some way. And so no matter, it really depends on what you're working on as in terms of what you should focus. Probably you're working on a product. Your product needs to solve a problem. You have to prove that. The next place to focus is the passion. And then from there you go back to conversion, you go back to your funnel, and you go finally start at awareness.
Got it. Thanks, Jeremiah. So our next question is, how do we build a brand in B2B segment? Is it any
Yep.
different from B2C?
Yeah, so B2B is a little bit different than B2C, but not significantly. The difference between B2B and B2C is obviously you're trying to sell to a company. But I always kind of joke around about the fact that if you're trying to sell, let's say that you have an incredible new technology that is going to revolutionize the movie industry in some way. And you think that the B2B play is with Sony. So you want to sell to Sony as your B2B play. You don't show up at Sony's headquarters outside with your product and say, Sony, I've arrived, here's my product, take it, buy it from me. No, typically you're going to sell that product to a person, a human being inside of Sony. And so if you're focused on B2B, you need to discover the person inside of that organization, inside of that business that has the problem most acutely, right? And then you need to build the relationship with them based around solving their problem, based around your product. A great example from back in the day is whiteout. So whiteout is, if you remember, it's the little bottle of stuff that you can unscrew, and if you make a mistake in your typing or in writing, you can white out literally the mistake and write over it again. Well, Betty Naismith creates this, and she was a typist. And as a typist on a typewriter, if you made a mistake back before whiteout, say you're in your last word and you accidentally misspell that last word, what are your options, right? Your options are to tear that piece of paper out, throw it away, and start over again, right? And so she creates whiteout to solve this, and it's a B2B play. She needs to sell it to offices. And so she takes it around to the first, office managers, and no one will buy it. Well, because the office manager doesn't have the problem. Who has the problem? The typist. And so the typist goes, oh my gosh, yes, I would buy this 100%. And she starts selling it there. And so if you're in a B2B business, who within the organization has the problem? How can you build a relationship with them? Where do they hang out? Who do they trust? How can you start to focus on them in a way that you can build passion with them? And then, once that person has experienced your solution or your product or has built a relationship with you, they're going to be passionate. They're going to be your growth engine inside of that organization to then take it over to the sales team or to take it over to the ops side of the house or to take it to the marketing side of the house to tell them, you have to use this product because it solved our problem in a significant way. And so B2B needs to focus on a particular person inside of the organization that has that problem and learn how to build a relationship with them.
Got it. Thanks, Jeremiah. Hi, Piyush, do you have any questions?
Yeah, hi. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Yeah. So hi, Jeremiah. First of all, yeah, it was really good to attend the presentation. This was very nice learning for me as well. So a few of the questions that I have that I had two basically startups. So one of the startup was the robotics startup back in the college. So we were taking the robotics workshops and all. The one flag that we faced over there is that how to take the startup from one age to the like from one stage to the other stage, because it definitely required the funding, but it required as well what else it required is the the vision, the future vision, because we really didn't know just after taking the workshop or maybe just basic autonomous robotics, how should we take it from there. Like I liked making robots. My colleagues liked making robots, but we did not really find a customer base who would really like it. So we were like pretty successful in the short term vision, but for the long term vision we kind of lost it somehow somewhere. And so
Yep.
that's my question: that how do you actually find the boundary over there?
Right. So yeah, that's a great question. So I think that you can be one of the worst pieces of advice that exists for entrepreneurs is follow your passions, because you could be passionate about say 18th century quilt pens, right? And that's great, but the audience for that is probably significantly small. You're probably not going to be able to make a living off of that. And
Yeah.
so what I say instead is, follow your effort. And so if your effort is truly around robotics, right? I think that's what you're saying that your first
Yeah.
startup was. The market for that may be small, and that's really a lifestyle question for you. Is not every startup is a 10x or a 20x or a 100x. Not every startup's a unicorn. So what is it that? Why are you doing that? What is it that you're hoping to get out of it? The audience may be just a passionate group of those early adopters and never scales up to an early majority or a majority, right? Are you okay with that? And so not every startup is scalable in a way that you will hit a majority of the market. The market may just remain small, or you may be extremely early in that market. It sounds like with robotics, it's a pretty early market in terms of long-term adoption. And so to me, that's a lifestyle question. If for you that's not good enough, if that's you want the 100x business, then that problem is probably not big enough, or that solution is not big enough to have that. And so what I would say is to focus instead on, again, going back and saying, what are some of the obvious problems that exist here for the customer? So instead of saying, I can build robots, this is what I want to build, what are the problems that are associated around things that robots could actually solve? And so just yesterday I was hanging out at the beach for Labor Day, and I would have never thought in a million years, but a guy came out with a drone, and he flew his drone right over the break of the surf, and was videotaping and videoing all the surfers. And as they get a great wave, he'd follow them along their wave and follow them the whole way through, and then come back to the center and wait for the next one. And what I was thinking is how amazing that the combination of a GoPro and a drone. Who would have thought those would be bedfellows? But the problem truly exists if you think about it. How does a surfer videotape themselves? Or how do they ever have evidence of that massive wave other than the story they told? Well, now there's an opportunity with the drone and which is a robot of sorts, right? And a camera that solves that problem significantly, right? And so for me, come back to focusing on the problem that the customer has, and a solution that you can provide may or may not be viable for that, right? Instead of saying we want to take our idea and make it 100x, the only way that it gets 100x is if the problem that the customer's having is big enough and enough people have that problem.
Yeah, right. I have another question because sometimes we have to choose between the passion and the easy way out. So the passion for something that we could find a solution for a problem, and there might be already solutions available in the market for that problem, but they might not be like pretty flexible, or they might not be 100% suitable to that market. For example, suppose along with my friends, actually we wanted to make a drone which could actually help the farmers to measure the moist level in soil, which could actually help them to increase the production of the crops. So I just came across one person. He was like, why do you want to target making a drone? If you want to make a drone, and then again, if you want to mass scale it, then definitely you would just be lost in it, because that's not your. It's like you would like to make a drone as a hobby, but if you want to really make this as a business, then it would definitely, if you do the mass, you need to have friends in China, and then do the mass scale. Just prototype might be easy, but the productization might not be so easy. And then you kind of miss your real problem, that you want to help farmers in helping something with the image processing that you would want to do. So why not contact a drone company and just deal with them that, see, I have this image processing application, just I'll just give you the camera, get the feed of the moist, and I'll do the processing, and I'll just give you back. So this is something like an easy way out to the problem, but somehow it kind of lacks the passion. The passion also involves over here is the complete end-to-end the product. So what do you recommend? Sometimes an easy way out is a better way of finding a solution, or end-to-end product solution. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, so it's a very complex question, and I'll give a very simple answer, hopefully. It is that in lean there's a concept called pull. So pull means that literally you don't grind or pick the beans, roast them, grind them, or heat the water, pour it over until the cup of coffee is ordered, right? Or the cup of tea is ordered, right? So to me, there's not a demonstration of pull there. So the wrong way to go about it is to go, okay, we want to create a drone that can, I think that's cool, that can tell the temperature or the soil, right, composition from the air, That's an amazing thing, right?
Yeah, right.
The question is, does the farmer have that problem? In
Mm-hmm.
what way? Did they told you that they have that problem? If the
Mm-hmm.
problem is big enough and you're solving it for one, so
Mm-hmm.
units of one, solve it for one farmer in a way that's significant, that's meaningful,
Right.
that passion, then hopefully the next customer, there's pull. So then maybe you need 2 drones, right, to do
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Because you've got 2 or 3 customers, and then maybe you need 3 drones to do this.
Yeah.
And then maybe at the point that you have 10 different farmers that are using this at different times, maybe at that point you need to build a relationship with a drone company in China. So the idea is that you don't try and predict all of the things that you would need. You simply try to deliver value to the customer, and if that happens, you then try to grow by units of one. And so to me, the focus is really on solving that problem for one farmer, that they're paying you money in such a way that it's sustainable, that they're passionate about the solution, that they're introducing their farmer friends to you and saying you have to use this. And then the demand should always stay right in front of the supply. You should always have more demand than you have supply or capacity. A great example is back in the big internet boom, Webvan. I don't know if you remember this company, but Webvan launched in the Silicon Valley, and their whole idea was to carry groceries right to homes with cars, right, and vans. I mean, now it's kind of a well done, it happens, but back then it wasn't. And so Webvan went out and raised a ton of money. They went out and they rented a huge warehouse space. They bought a bunch of vans. They invested a bunch of money, right? And they had all the infrastructure built to go huge. And they launched, and I think within 90 days or so or less, they were shut down. All the investors lost all their money. Everybody lost everything. Take that into contrast to Zappos. Zappos starts back in kind of the internet boom as well and says, hey, we don't know if people will buy shoes online. Just like you would say, we don't know if farmers will use a drone to test their soil. So they went down to the local shoe shop, asked the patron there if they could take photos of the shoes. They took some photos of the shoes. They went back, they posted them online, they drove some traffic to it, and when an order of shoes came in, they walked back down to the shoe store, bought the shoes, carried it back to their apartment, wrapped them up, and shipped them to the customer under Zappos' name. So that's, again, they could have bought warehouses, they could have bought tons and pairs of shoes and inventory and done all of this, their own delivery trucks, but the demand needs to stay in front of the supply. And so for you, the demand for the drone in terms of testing the soil needs to be at 2 before you buy your first drone, right, or your second drone, or 3. And so that's the iterative process of development. That's why we say it's hypothesis driven. That's why we say start with units.
Thanks, Jarma. We are almost at the end of our time. Thanks a lot. If you can share the PPT and the case studies, I would distribute it to the participants.
Absolutely.
And probably if I have if there are more questions, probably they can tweet you or mail you, right?
Say that one more time.
So probably if the participants have more questions, they can tweet you or mail you, right?
Yeah, please tweet me, and I'd love to hear from you and connect with you. And like I said, go to leanbrandbook.com. There's all the artwork, free chapter of the book. You can get the book as well on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Google Play or Apple Store, wherever you want. It's all over the place. So feel free to connect online, and thank you so much for having me. And congratulations on a very successful conference, Lean Conference. Amazing.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay, have a good one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye bye.